Welcome to Parenting Decoded, a podcast for practical approaches to parenting. I'm Mary Eschen. In this episode, I'm excited to have Liz Bayardelle, author of Clean Your Plate, 13 Things That Good Parents Say That Ruin Kids' Lives. This book covers all sorts of unintended consequences that good parents say regularly, like, get straight A's, don't hit, sit still, don't be a quitter, and many more. She goes into detail in all these areas and has wonderful ideas about how to combat our natural tendencies to push our kids in ways that might backfire. Liz has a PhD in business psychology, and her dissertation was all about failure and how we deal with it. Being the mom of 2 young kids and a stepmom to a teenager, she found that there are lots of opportunities to turn situations at home that might be sending the wrong messages into positive, winning experiences, which can make a huge difference in our kids' lives in the long run. Enjoy the talk and head to my podcast notes for a link to her book. Welcome, Liz, to Parenting Decoded. I'm so happy to have you as a guest on this podcast. I'm excited to talk to you about unintended consequences of things good parents do.
Yes, emphasis on good parents. It's with a sarcastically titled book, you always have to have the warning label. It's like, all good parents say these things. I'm not condemning your lifestyle because I have said all of them.
Yeah. Well, I love how you have lots of different chapters. And I want to do our interview today talking about the chapter, which is chapter 2, about getting straight A's. How lots of parents tell their kids to get straight A's, and it's super important to the family. Tell me about why you picked that as an unintended consequence. And you have lots of really good points in your chapter about how to deal with that. What was your gut feel about why you added that?
Well, an alternative title to the book that my therapist probably vetoed was Ways I Am Screwed Up Due to My Upbringing. I was a huge, sob if you get a B plus type of nerd as a child. So I cared so much about that report card and that A in the column and making it like it's a perfection fetish almost. And then fast forward, I'm getting my PhD. I did my dissertation in failure. And one of the variables I studied for my dissertation was intrinsic motivation. And it's just like everything I learned was like, oh God, this is so bad. I did this so wrong. Oh my God, everyone's doing this wrong. So a lot of my discussion posts in my grad program weren't about business psychology, which is my actual degree, but it was like ways I'm not messing up my 6th grader. Because so just it was just shocking to me how everyone pursues the straight A, the outcome, the end game, but that's kind of psychologically creating less motivated kids than it could.
And I love how your book talks about that. And can you first explain the difference between intrinsic motivation in kids versus extrinsic, or people in general? It's not unique to children, but can you explain some of that?
Yeah, basically it comes down to kind of a carrot and stick thing. External motivation is bribery, coercion, punishment. Something outside of you is controlling your behavior by giving you either positive or negative reinforcement. So I'll give you $1 to help me unload the dishwasher is external motivation.
Or I'll give you $10
I'll
for
pay you
an
$5. Yeah, I'll get and one we see a lot, external motivation, which drives me batty, is I'll give you $5 every book you finish.
Oh, books.
Which is really, really dangerous. And I will get on that soapbox in a sec. But first, let's finish definitions. External motivation is the forces coming from outside you. Internal motivation is something you want to do because it makes you feel good. So if you are internally motivated to read, you don't need money, you don't need anything. You're doing it because you want to do it. So the force is coming from within the person. And you see this a lot with kids. Kids are born very intrinsically motivated. Toddlers want to get in everything. One of my daughters, she's 6 now. One of her most cherished objects is a book that I was giving to Goodwill from my college Russian classes. It is, I think it's War and Peace in original Cyrillic Russian. And she carries it around everywhere. She's like, I love this, mommy. I'm learning to read. I'm like, you don't know Cyrillic, child. But she loves it. She is so intrinsically motivated to carry on the book, and she loves it. And it's not that like I'm giving her money to learn Russian, because that would be weird in several ways, but she is very motivated because it comes from within her.
Mhm.
So we see toddlers, they are intrinsically motivated to do everything, even really, really stupid stuff. But then we come in with our A's and our grading system and our external priorities and our education system, and we kind of crush the internal motivation out of kids, which sounds really bad, and it's not an uncommon thing for educators and parents to realize. Is like, okay, the way we've structured this is wrong, but the way we've structured this is wrong.
Yeah, and I really liked how in that, as you were explaining the intrinsic motivators, which I work with a lot of parents who say, my kid, they don't care about, they'll rush through their homework. They don't care about their grades or whatever. Like some parents are lucky and they have kids who are on the program and they're trying to only get A's, but they aren't
Mhm.
absorbing the information and stuff like that. And you have in that chapter, you have what you call, intrinsic is the holy grail of parenting. Like we all want our kids to be
Yeah.
self-motivated to do life and to learn new things and to be happy about it and stuff like that. And you talk about 4 different things that make it intrinsic motivation possible in our kids. One was autonomy, competence, relatedness, and purpose. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time having you explain those things that can help us as parents bring intrinsic motivation into the lives of our children.
Yeah, well, we can go through that list. Those are 4, that's a psychological model. It goes back to self-determination theory, which is the original psychological research behind what creates intrinsic motivation. And we can go through each of those 4 and show, in let's use grades as an example, how to either create or destroy intrinsic motivation. So first, autonomy is basically, you feel like you're in charge. You're the captain of your own ship. So if you have a child and you say, I need you to get a straight A's, I want you to get straight A's, that's the parent being the captain of the kid's ship. That is not making straight A's the kid's priority. That's making straight A's the parent's priority. And it might align because the kid usually wants to please the parent, but it's still not about them. Alternatively, if you say stuff like, oh, doesn't it feel good when you get a good grade on the test? Or, oh, don't you love when you just like, you mastered the material? Or, oh, it's so fun to figure stuff out. That's showing the kid how getting the good grades and getting the results is making them happy. So they're the captain of the ship. It's something they're choosing as opposed to something we're focusing on
Right.
them. So that's autonomy. Another thing, competence is really, really huge. Um, Parents aren't as shame based now as they have been at times in the past. But one of the things that makes all humans, and this is parents and kids alike, want to do something is when we feel like we're decently good at it. And if your kid feels like, I am hopeless at math, I am never going to get this, my teacher thinks I'm a moron, my mom thinks I'm a moron, then they're not going to want to do it. But if you create the little wins for your kid and you chunk it down into really bite sized pieces so that your kid feels the victories, and even if they're not doing up to grade level or they're not doing big things right yet, even if you can give them like small little footsteps that are right, it gives them that endorphin boost of like, oh my gosh, I did something right. I'm good at this. And when you feel like you're good at something, you want to do it all the time. So that's another huge way that if you're doing the shame-based parenting or like, why can't you get this? And like, parents don't ever intend to parent that way, but when you add parenting to all the stresses of your day and all the stresses of your kid's day and being in a hurry and dealing with multiple siblings at once and cooking dinner and doing that, sometimes you snap and you're like, why don't you get this? But we have to realize that part of their motivation, what's making them want to do this, is feeling like they're good at it.
Yeah.
So that's the competence
Okay.
part.
And then their next
And
relatedness was
that's
another.
relatedness is harder with homework because it's very
Or
much
A's.
it's an individual sport. It's not a team sport, or yeah, or grades because it's your report card and everything. But relatedness is about our connection to community. Humans are tribal creatures, kids even more so. So when you're pursuing the straight A's or you're pursuing the homework behavior you want to find a way to tie it into their community. And with high schoolers, that could be like, oh, if you get good grades, then you can go to the schools your friends are going to. Like, you guys can apply to colleges together. You kind of show how it ties them in. For a younger kid, it could be like, oh, I know your best friend Sarah is going into the challenge class. Like, let's work really hard so we can get you in with your friend. You can even do like little tiny things to connect them. Like, when you're doing math, use their friends' names in a word problem when you make it up. Like, it's simple and stupid, but if you make up a word problem about random Mad Lib names that they don't know, they're not going to be as motivated. But if you pick their best friend's name and say that they bought 27 puppies, all of a sudden your second graders' eyes are going to be glued to you because they're like, what? They would never get 27
Uh-huh.
puppies. That's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
you got their
Or maybe
attention.
like right now, it happens to be Girl Scout cookie season. And so if you have a little Girl Scout, you could do a math problem with Girl Scout cookie boxes. And if you have 10 customers that
Yeah,
all want 5 boxes or, kind of that kind of stuff.
none, because mommy ate them all.
Okay. And then how about purpose was the last thing in that list for intrinsic?
Purpose, I think, is most important when it comes to grades. This was actually added to the psychological model a little bit later than the other three, but I think it's kind of the most important. And that is, it's not about where they are, but about where they're going. So if you have a kid and you're like, you got to do calculus, they're going to be like, crap. But if you have a kid and you're like, you want to be a doctor, if you get a great grade in calculus, you're going to get into a better undergrad, you're going to get into a better med school, you're going to be closer to this thing that you really, really care about. So it's not about the A in and of itself. It's about how the A ties them in with something that they genuinely care about. And it doesn't have to, not all kids want to be doctors, but if a kid wants to be a rock star, they're going to need to know how to manage their finances and figure out their marketing and do metrics about A/B testing with album covers or whatever it is. But like, the more you can tie the very banal, low verb subject of like, oh, you get an A on a piece of paper into something that your kid really, really cares about, and figure out what that purpose is and how to tie the grades that you want them to get into the outcome that they want themselves to get, it'll kind of tie the ships together and it'll make them want it for their own purposes.
Yeah, I love the fact that there's these multiple facets to our kids and thinking about them in terms of creating that internal motivation for them. And one of the things that you talk about in the book is about how some of the ones, what's one of them is on competence, how a fixed mindset can kind of ruin competence and pushing our kids to get who might start out getting A's into being panicked about staying in that fixed mindset, like, oh, I can't get any better grades than this. I better keep doing this thing that I am doing over and over again. Talk to me about how you see that impacting this intrinsic motivation. And
This is a really scary one because the biggest victims of it are the kids that are really smart, especially the ones that are really smart to begin with. Because most kids, when they first go to school, once they master the basic, like, here are numbers, here are letters, they can do it without too much work. Addition, multiplication, like, you don't need to spend 4 hours cramming to do that at the pace that most elementary schools go. Um, and especially with the smart kids, they get it without even trying. And then instead of praising their effort, we say, oh, you're so smart. You did that without even trying. And then there's a day when they have to actually try. And it's terrifying because sometimes it doesn't happen till law school. Like, I've had my you have to actually try moment in my 8th grade chemistry class. And it was the first class I'd ever had to study to get an A in. And I was terrified because I didn't know how to study because I'd never had to before. And all of a sudden, I'd been praised my whole life. Oh, you're so smart. You're doing this effortlessly. You're doing this without even trying. It was all tied to, like, I'm smart because I do it without studying. And now that I had to study, it was like, am I stupid now? Like, is that the end of it? Am I done? Like, that was it? 8th grade is all I
right.
get?
And you had a long journey
So
ahead
you
because you could see yourself going to college. It was like, oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I had made my identity as one of the smart kids, so when this scary thing happened and all of a sudden I had to put in work where I hadn't had to. I was so used to getting praised for not having to do work that it felt like the act of studying was already a failure because, like, God, I have to work for this. I'm obviously a
Right.
moron. But we can sow the seeds of a growth mindset with our kids, which is praising their effort. Or my favorite one that I've learned about and I've installed in my kids, I won't say brainwash, I'll say installed, is, oh God, that was easy. I'm sorry. That must have been really boring for you. Instead of, good job, you did that really
Right. Right.
fast.
I like that.
So I actually, if my daughter like does a math worksheet really easily without effort, I don't congratulate her on it. I say, I'm sorry, that must have been really dull. Like, let's find you something that's more fun. And that is a very natural thing for kids to do if you can compare it to like toddler life. Like, if you take a toddler to a park, they're not going to do the most boring slide. They're going to do the one that's fun and scary and exciting because it's not tied to failure
Hmm.
yet. But then if you praise the kid for going down the slide without being scared, they're not going to pick the scary slide. They're going to pick the slide that they can go down without being scared. Same with grades. If you keep praising, like, oh, you got an A without trying, you're such a genius. Then the second they don't get an A without trying, they're like, I will find something easier that I can get praised for. So instead of praising them for the lack of effort, praise like, whoa, I love it. You tried like 5 different ways for that math problem and you kept going until you found the answer. You're really smart. Tie intelligence to effort, tie intelligence to that like study skills. Or I love how you tried to study one way for this test and it didn't work. And then you tried a different way for the next test. That was really resourceful of you. So just kind of finding little ways to praise effort rather than outcome. And if you fast forward to the workplace where kids are hopefully going to end up, that's the stuff that's going to get you promoted. If your boss gives you something, they don't care how long it takes you. They're not watching you. They're not sitting over your shoulder like a teacher is. They care that you try a bunch of different ways and you made it work. They care that you see the extra thing that needs doing and go above and beyond to do that. That's what's going to get our kids promoted and noticed in the
Yeah.
workplace. So this whole like the A is the eventual end game and it's all we care about, and just do it as fast as you can, as well as you can. And that's the smart kid. We kind of want to start overriding that to like the kid that's resourceful, the kid that takes the harder class, even though they might get a B in it. That's the kid that should get praised. Just to kind of slowly shift the mindset away from this like fear of failure, panic inducing straight Aism that created the nervous wreck that is
Yeah,
me.
well, I think especially I'm in Silicon Valley, and there are so many families who value only grades, and our kids are just in this mode of like, oh, I have to get an A no matter what. They'll stay up 24 hour, they'll pull all-nighters to get the grade, but it's not necessarily soaking in either. I would love to have your comments about lag measures versus lead measures. Could you explain that concept that you talk about in your book and how it impacts us as parents?
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite concepts. It comes from a leadership book called Four Disciplines of Execution. It helps managers and people in the workplace optimize their teams and get their business units more productive. But basically, a lead measure is something that the action you're taking comes before the results are measured. Whereas a lag measure is something that is measured afterwards. So grades, you take the test and then you get the grade. So the grade is a lag measure. You cannot affect your grade by the time you know what it is, which is kind of scary. But so the concept behind this is when we're parenting, and especially when we're helping kids with academic stuff, you want to translate whatever your lag measure is. So translate the grade into lead measures, which are behaviors that can be taken before the outcome. So if the test is when you're being measured, lead measures can be how many times you review your flashcards, how many times you reread the chapter, how many minutes a night you spend doing Quizlet on your phone, how many times you rewrite your vocabulary list, whatever it is. Those are things that happen before the measurement takes place. So in this book, it talks about how you want to shift your focus away from the lag measures, which happen after. And by the time you know your results on them, you have no control over the outcome. So that creates kind of frustration, fear of failure, and anxiety. Whereas if you shift, so instead of saying, I'll give you $10 per A you get. You say, okay, any day when you study for more than 30 minutes outside of your set homework, you get extra dessert. So you're reinforcing the behaviors that come before the measurement as opposed to using the measure that comes after they have any control over it. And it'll really help your kid because then they can start troubleshooting better on their own. So it's not like, I got a D. Well, what happened? I don't know. I can't tell you. But you can start translating lead measures to results. So it's like, okay, this test, you reread the chapter every night and you got a C. And then the next test, instead of rereading the book, you started using flashcards and you got a B. So you saw that that was a more effective way to do it than the other. So you can kind of teach them to start troubleshooting for themselves as opposed to what happens in most families, and mine included. Sometimes it's like, oh, I had a test. Wow, did you study? Yeah, I guess. Oh, how'd you do? I got a C. What happened? I don't know. And that's it. And you don't go back. Usually, I love it when teachers assign test corrections because it makes kids actually figure out what went wrong and troubleshoot it. And it makes us focus more on the learning than on the outcome. But it's very much not a common practice. I'm a horrendous mom and I make my kids do test corrections anyway, and they hate it, but they'll thank me
Yeah,
later.
I've been using Duolingo to try to learn some Italian, and in the software itself, they
Ooh,
keep giving you the things that you keep getting wrong, so that you have a chance to practice them, as opposed to like, oh, sorry, you didn't get, you know, beans, so you can't have beans. It's like I just love how, I mean, it's annoying because I'm like, oh no, I misspelled that word. They're gonna give it to me again, aren't they? But at the same time, I have that
yeah.
intrinsic motivation of like, hey, I want to learn some Italian. And I do think that those
And
those test corrections, I love those teachers that like you want people to learn. And I really felt in your book when I was reading it, it brought back memories of like, what college or high school classes do you even remember? It's like I took a whole year of calculus and 2 years of advanced math I have a computer science degree. And it's just like, I remember none of that. Like I can add and subtract and all that kind of stuff, all functional that of the stuff that I do day to day. But like calculus had no meaning to me because I had to get through it in order to get my degree, and it had
yeah.
no what would it be? It had no purpose for me in the long run, and I knew it wouldn't. I have
Yeah.
one of my sons is a mechanical engineer, and he needs stuff like that. He uses it every day, so he's motivated and reinforced in his work in order to use that stuff. And each of us has stuff that makes sense to us about what we're doing for your PhD program or your, even kids that are studying music in high school or soccer or whatever the skills are that they're trying to learn. That reinforcement, you're so right in that, like having a purpose and that internal motivation that they actually want to do that is so helpful.
Yeah, and you can tie that straight to like what classes do you remember? Because if you ask someone, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, like what classes do you remember from high school? Relatedness. If you have a strange teacher, if you have a teacher that dresses up in costumes, if you have a teacher that is really personable, you will remember
Uh-huh.
that class because relatedness. If you have a class that you really wanted to take and you fought for and you had to rewrite your essays and really work hard, but you were determined, autonomy, you're going to remember that class. But if you're doing classes because they were on your degree program and you had to take the class to get the 11-cent piece of paper that said you had a bachelor's, you're never going to
Yeah.
remember it in the morning,
Yeah,
not to mention in
totally.
10 years.
I see kids in high school do that all the time. They're trying to get into every AP class, even though they hate history. They'll take an AP history class. They hate history. Or computer science was the only class that they let sophomores take at the high school my boys went to. And so all these sophomores took computer science and they had no interest whatsoever in computer science. It was just really sad because really, really bright kids, absolutely. And they're those straight A kind of kids, and they were trying to go for that lag goal and like getting into that college, which was an external motivator of like I guess intrinsic. They wanted to go to a certain college, so they were willing to do.
Yeah, no, it does
Yeah,
tie to purpose. Like, if you
yeah,
want to go to a certain college, getting straight
yeah,
A's does jive with your purpose, but it's not going to be as strong as some other
yeah,
ties.
exactly.
And it's very hard to do this as a parent because you are flying in the face of a lag goal, extrinsic motivation culture.
Yes.
Like our whole education system, like everything we do is based on lag goals and external motivation. So I do give parents the warning that you're flying in the face of the wind
Yeah.
here. But it's really going to be helpful for your kids the more you can inject those little like, oh, well, that must have been really boring for you. I'm sorry it was
Yeah. It's like,
easy.
how could we make it more challenging next time kind of stuff. Hey, do you want to take a
Yeah. Or when you're doing flashcards with,
No.
oh,
Do you want to take
sorry.
a few minutes to talk about chapter 9, which is finish your homework? All us parents who say finish your homework, and it causes all sorts of behaviors, unintended
Yeah.
consequences in how they study, which has to do with getting A's and stuff like that. But a lot of the parents I work with, they go like, "Oh, my kid just rushes through their homework." It's like they're not really absorbing the homework, and it's so unfun. And I was really intrigued by your list of homework being a negative. It's just like people don't want to do it. They just hate it. And it impacts.
Yeah. It's hard. Everyone's like, "Oh, homework. I'm sorry. Oh, do you
Yeah.
have a lot of homework today?" Like the implicit statement that homework is bad to be avoided and like is something that is being put upon you is really hard to fight against. And even more so for parents with older children that have kind of already been indoctrinated. I was doing a lot of this stuff and writing this book when my daughter was very little. So I have installed a different operating system in her. So actually, if she throws a homework tantrum, I'm like, okay, sorry, disrespectful girls don't get to learn. You can have your homework back when you can speak to me with a more rational tone. But you really have to kind of portray it in a very different light. It's like, no, this is how you're going to be a smart person. This is how you're going to learn stuff. This is a privilege. Like, sorry, you don't get to do your homework right now. Guess you're going to be unprepared tomorrow. But like,
Huh.
because it's like even teachers will say stuff like, oh, sorry, I'm going to give you a lot of homework tonight. It's like the implicit
Right.
underlying assumption there is homework is bad and it's something I'm doing to you
Right.
unfairly. So you kind of really have to help your kids conceptualize like you can't get all the knowledge you need in the time you're at school. So the purpose of homework is to teach you more stuff than your teachers can cram into the
Right.
school day. So when you're encouraging them to do homework as fast as they can, you're saying learning doesn't matter, just get through it, bucko. Like this is a sacrifice, take one for the team, do your math facts, come back, then we'll do something fun. But if you say like, okay, let's get you to understand this. Like let's see how let's see how fast we can get it, then it'll be easy. Like once let's see what they're trying to teach you, and once you understand that, it's going to be fun. And then you tie in that competence that we talked about before. So first it's like the goal of this is learning, not
Yeah.
escaping. And then once you've learned it, you're going to be awesome. You're going to be a champ at this. Tomorrow is going to be so much easier. In class, it'll make so much more sense. Like, so you have to take a step. A lot of this is taking a step back from like, okay, we just have to slug through this and make it to bedtime. It's you and me, kid. Like, and going to the actual purpose of what you're doing and kind of speaking to the purpose rather than speaking to the
Yeah.
activity.
I like that. Just changing that. The mindset of all of us as we work with our kids to encourage them to get their homework done. I know that, like, in my house, we set up like, oh, when we come home from school, everybody does their homework and then we get to do something. So, my boys, they didn't complain too much about it. And I can't go back in time, but I like how setting that mindset of like, I wonder what we're going to learn today. And that's part of that growth mindset too. Like, you don't know your math facts yet.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity to learn math facts or new spelling words. Like, wow, new words. How exciting. And sort of like imparting that kind of enthusiasm into our kids, although they might be tired from their day.
And
They might.
and this is slightly a tangent, but the concept of agency really, really translates into adulthood. And we're putting this in their personality, so we might as well make it a good one. But if kids feel like homework is being forced upon me, my choices are being forced on me, I have no autonomy, you're gonna you're more likely to turn into an adult that's like, God, work is putting all these things on me. Like, oh, I have to do all this stuff for my family. Whereas, in fact, as an adult, you choose 100% of the stuff you do. So it's like, yeah, work might be a pain in the butt, but it's your pain in the butt. You chose that pain in the butt, and most likely you
Well,
enjoy that.
hopefully.
So teaching our kids early on to like this is mine. I'm owning this. I want to do this. Like if you ask any kid, like, do you want to be dumb? They're going,
Right.
no, of course not. I want to be one of the smart kids. So if you put them with their homework and like, this is your ticket to being one of the smart kids. This is your super secret weapon. Like other kids aren't paying attention to their homework. They're just doing it as fast as they can. But if you are learning from this, you're going to get ahead. And then that agency we talked about, that autonomy, it makes it something that they want. They see the benefit of it. They're going to latch onto it with both hands. And all of a sudden they're doing it fast because they understand it. Because once they get it, homework is really not that challenging. Unless you're in an AP class and then they're just trying to break you. But your kids will see the benefit more if it's like, this is your ticket to learning stuff. And once you learn the thing, you'll be done.
And all this stuff relates back to that growth mindset of, hey, if it's challenging, it's okay. It's a good challenge. And just because you don't get it right now doesn't mean that you don't know it yet. I like Carol Dweck in her book, Mindset. She talks about that power of yet. I think it's what she calls it in the book of like,
Yes.
well, you don't know it
Yeah,
yet, but like what a great opportunity and to grow your brain. And
that book should be required reading at every hospital where they deliver
totally
babies.
agree. I
swear by
love
it.
how she points out in her research how fixed mindset kids, they tend to break, they tend to give up, they tend to not have that intrinsic motivation, like you said, because so many external motivators in their lives of like the pats on the back, like, oh, you're so smart. And it's like when they start doubting themselves, like you did in 8th grade, it's like it can really snowball. I've seen high schoolers and college kids who fall apart because things got hard. Things were really easy for a long time. And when things got hard, they fell apart. And
especially the ones that are naturally gifted, because the fall apart comes later. Like there have been people I've known that didn't have that moment until they were in grad school. And they're like, I've never had to work in my life. What is broken about
yeah,
me now? And it's like, most people just happened in 3rd grade. You're just late
yeah,
to the party, bud.
yeah. Well,
Grab
and
a
it's great
chair.
if a parent can see that frustration in their child and allow the positivity of the challenge and like, gosh, you don't know that yet. It seems crazy that you don't know that yet. How are we going to get that to happen? And give, brainstorm with them and
And
stuff like that instead of telling them like, you have to learn it this way or something like that. I wonder how, like you had said before, like, I wonder if it's reading more or using flashcards or what, sort of like brainstorming different things that they might not know yet to use in order to get through that.
And one thing I really, really want to encourage for all parents, that this was very counterintuitive for me, is parents are conditioned that we're supposed to know the answers. And when you have like a very small child, you do have all the answers and they're very easily accessible because your kid's a moron.
Well, maybe not.
Showcase the moments when you don't know stuff. Showcase the moments when you have failed at
Oh,
something and show them how you work through it properly. So if they ask you a question, you're like, God, I have no idea how to do this. Let's Google it
yeah,
together. Let's
yeah,
figure it out. Okay, how do I know which of these websites is run by a crackpot and which one of these is a government source? Like, how do I figure out, oh man, I messed this up at work today. Let me tell you a story of how I fixed my mistake. Because kids care very little about what we tell them, especially when we're trying to lecture them, but they see everything we do, especially if we don't
yeah.
think
Or
they're
especially
watching.
if we mess
So
up and they
like
want to see what we do.
yeah, so it's really very instinctive to be like, cover your mistakes, don't show your kids that you're imperfect, but like, you had a bad day, show your kid the feels, show them that you have it too, show them how you get out
Yeah,
of the hole. Because that's what parents are. We show like, okay, we can't run into walls. You have to put on shoes before you go outside. But at a certain point, we stop modeling behavior because it's scary to let them into our imperfections. But if we show them like, wow, I have no idea how to do your math problem. Let's figure it out together. Okay, here's an example from the back of the book. Let's see if we can figure it out. No, that didn't make sense to me. Let's go on Khan Academy, see if they have a video. Then they see us troubleshooting. And instead of modeling that, oh, I'm perfect, I know everything, and then feeling insecure and bad when they don't know everything, they say, huh, mom doesn't know everything easy anyway, but she knows how to
yeah,
figure stuff out. Between mom and Google,
yeah. And
everything
I
is
think
possible.
in the long run, that's what we want our kids to be able to do is to solve problems. Because every day has endless amounts of
Yeah,
problems
because
that get thrown at us. And we want our kids to be able to solve them. And those are the kind of kids that are going to do great things in the long run. the kids who have a problem.
Yeah, because they won't be
Exactly. The
scared to
kids who have
try.
problems thrown at them who break, they're going to be the worker bees that are just churning things away and not being the creative, amazing, problem solvers of the world in the future. So, well, thanks. Yeah.
But no
Thanks
pressure.
so much, Liz. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I know that there's parents out there who would love to solve this problem about getting homework done in a positive way. And you have a lot of great suggestions in your book. And I will put in my podcast notes, I'll put the link to the book, and I'll put it up on my website too, so that people could get a hold of Clean Your Plate, 13 things good parents say that will ruin kids' lives. I just love, yeah.
Good parents.
Good parents.
Emphasis
Yeah,
on
yeah,
good
exactly.
parents.
Anyway, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you.